Hello. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. So glad to be here. So glad to be able to answer a few of your questions about me, about my vision, and about the work of the Evanston Community Foundation. So just thank you all for joining, hanging out. I know so many people already hopped over from spending a bit of time listening to some great stories from some of our grantees, and I'm honored and that you're willing to listen to me for a little bit too. So thank you all for being here. Um, Many of you know, um, as I see some questions piling up, I'm excited to answer all of those. Just a little bit, quickly about me. Many of you know that I was many years ago the city's first youth coordinator, and I'm so glad to be back in Evanston, to be doing this work in my home, and to be able to give in so many different ways to a community that has nurtured me personally and professionally, and is nurturing my family. And I've got a long history, mostly in the nonprofit leadership space, but I'm excited about this opportunity to do the work in a new way, in a deep way. So looking forward to jumping into some of the questions and talking with you all tonight, and not only tonight, but getting to know you over the coming days, weeks, months, and years as we sit in this role and do so many great things for the community.
So it looks like we have some great questions in the chat. While we start with those, if anyone wants to raise their hand and come on stage and ask a question on video, we'd love to bring you up. In the meantime, Stephen Vick asks, why did you choose this role now in your career?
Yeah, Stephen, it's a great question. As I mentioned, I spent a long time in the nonprofit space, and kind of more broadly in the civic sector, nonprofit and government work. And I think for those of us who have done this work, there's typically a passion that brings you to the space, is something that you really follow. But as you do this work, at least from my experience, you find that so many other things um, are meaningful to you. So many other things you find to be important. Even if they're not sort of your core challenge. I've worked a lot in the anti-poverty space, anti-violence space. I've done a lot of youth and family work, and I also sometimes find that there are times when I find my passion really being, I find myself feeling really passionately about environmentalism, and how that what that means for equity in our society, or how the arts might touch people's lives and create new pathways. And that when you're deeply entrenched in some type of work, you don't get much chance to touch that. And I was so excited. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be not only investing with money, but putting our time and effort in community building into a variety of different ways to solve some of these big community challenges, and to support a community that has so much to give in a lot of different areas.
The next question we have is from April Arnold, who asks, as the new president, what do you hope to accomplish or change during your first year?
Ooh. The first thing I hope to accomplish is really just to get to know what Evanston is, in terms of how Evanston sort of is as a community, what Evanston looks like as a community now. I've lived here for some time, but I've worked in the city, mostly on the south side, for the last 5 or 6 years, and I've been away from Evanston professionally for over a decade. And I think that it's a mistake for any leader to think that what's going on in a community or in an organization without listening first. So a big part of my first year is just going to be kind of going on a listening tour and getting a sense of what the big challenges are for the community, and doing it in a way that I feel it's best done. And that's by I'm not just going to elected officials, I'm not just going to nonprofit leaders, but I want to talk to everyone in the community to really build a broad understanding of what's going on. And that's important to me, because one of the, timeline wise, one of the first things we want to accomplish as an organization is the completion of our strategic plan. So we have a good foundation, and our entire strategic plan is rooted in racial equity. And we want to really finish that plan up, and start to build the action plan from the strategic plan. And so the listening that we'll be doing throughout, make sure that we'll stay on path for that work. And I really want to lay the groundwork for what we're going to look like in the coming years, in terms of an organization that's hoping to accomplish racial equity in Evanston. And I know that's not, it sounds like a small, I think the way I'm saying it, it sounds a lot smaller than it is. But we have an opportunity to dive in and really do some deep work. And I want to seize this moment. So many organizations, just from the video and folks I've spoken to, even in my brief time, have talked to me about how the Community Foundation really showed up in so many different ways during the pandemic, and I want to do the work to continue that, and make sure that we aren't losing that community building spirit. And I don't expect to lose that because we have such an amazing staff that has been committed to that for years and years. But I want to make sure that we're harnessing that and making it a part of our processes going forward.
Would anyone like to ask a question on camera? If you raise your hand, I'll bring you up. Oh, we got someone. All right, Kimberly.
Oh, I think you're
Oh,
muted.
there I go.
There you go.
Okay, I'll be first. Welcome, Saul.
Thank you
Welcome.
so
We are
much. Thank you
excited
so much.
to have you. I remember some of the work you did with the youth and young adults at
Yeah.
the city. I'm Kimberly Holmes Ross. I'm with Evanston Cradle to Career, where our mission is to ensure the future of youth. So I think I want to ask you, what is your vision for Evanston youth in particular? What do you see for them? What would you like to see? What do you see that you like?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to say, you and I know we've crossed paths a couple of times. We haven't had much chance to get to know each other, but your mother is someone I deeply respect and is I mean, I'm not telling anybody here anything I don't know, but, Dolores Holmes is an institution in and of herself. So I know that you've got, the genetic disposition to create positive change in this community. Um, so I, when I think about youth, so I'm a father myself. I have a 6-year-old son. He just started. He did, whatever kindergarten looks like in this world. He just finished kindergarten at Walker School, and my wife and I decided to raise our family here in Evanston because, you know, I didn't grow up in a place where, where, I, when I spent time. I'm going to back up a little bit. When I spent time working here, one of my kind of formative experiences as doing the youth work was witnessing a young woman on the Evanston Youth Council, a young white woman talk about who was on the youth council but also on the student council at ETHS, talk about going to a statewide student council gathering downstate, and she had a roommate who was saying a lot of negative things about people of color, and this young woman stood up to her roommate and said, "You can't say that in front of me." And she told her story and said, "My best friend, who I've known my whole life, is black, and she has a child, and that's my goddaughter." And to some people that might not mean a lot, but where I grew up, you didn't. It just was rare for me to see lifelong interracial friendships, and I know that's strange to say, but you just didn't see those. And I know Evanston's not a perfect community, but no community is. But those sort of things, this community, there's something different about the way people come together in this community and have those opportunities and to do so. And I wanted that for my son. I wanted my son to grow up in an environment like that. And I want, but beyond that, I want every child in this community to not only have the opportunity to form those types of relationships and build those types of bridges, but I want all children to be able to be everything they want to be. I want children to thrive. I want a child born in Evanston tomorrow to have every door that should be open to them available to them. I want kids to be able to not be bound by their zip code. Many folks know the zip code you're born in is the number one predictor of poverty in America. Like, that is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous to me that that in this country where we've got such a narrative around people being able to do whatever they want and have an endless opportunity, that where you're born, it's so often just dictates where you're going to end up. And I want Evanston to be the community that changes that for young people. I want Evanston to be the example to the rest of the world about how we do that. And so, investing in youth, obviously, as you mentioned, that's my background. It's where I got my start, and it's something I deeply care about. And I was on the board of CNE, so I believe, in the value of investing in early childhood education to do that. But I just want this community to wrap its arms around every child born here and say, we're going to carry you until you're big enough to walk by yourself, to grit, to success, and to thriving.
Does anyone else want to ask a question on stage? I can bring you up. Just raise your hand by using the reactions button on the bottom right. All right. Well, our next question in the chats was from Bart Roca. He says, in your two previous positions, what ways did you find were useful in engaging with the community?
You just gotta you just gotta hit the pavement. Some of it is formal. You can set up focus groups, you can set up these opportunities to have communication. But sometimes it's just showing up, at places that you don't set up. It's walking neighborhoods, it's going to places of worship, it's going to community gatherings that are, put together by other entities in the community, talking to people at the grocery store, at restaurants, wherever you happen to find yourself. I think that finding those sort of unstructured ways to communicate are actually great places to find truth, right? Because when you're in a large group, most people, not most people, but there are some people who are less likely to speak up in those sort of environments. There are some people who aren't the kind of people who are going to, shout at a community meeting. But when you catch those folks one on one, you can get some real truth. And I think, oftentimes it's the folks who are quieter in those situations, who are taking things in. You find some really great nuggets of truth there by just listening. And so you've got to create a number of opportunities and not feel so beholden to these traditional, oh, we're going to host a focus group or a town hall. Those have their places. I know we're engaged in some of those now, and I think they're so important. But there are also other ways to listen, and you have to sometimes go the unofficial route to do that.
Great. And we have Clarence Weaver who would like to ask a question. Hi, Clarence.
Hey, Saul, and hello, everyone. Saul, once again, great to see you on screen. Looking forward to seeing you in person.
Yes, yes.
We got a scoop over here with your name on it.
Sounds good.
Something
Sounds
for
good.
your family as well.
I appreciate it.
One of the things that you mentioned, and a lot of us have been able to um, pivot and find a hybrid approach to addressing a lot of issues. Representatives from your team, from your board, which we thank greatly, have made themselves available. And literally, with this whole food insecurity issue, obviously that's just one small issue that exists. But my question is driving more around. We made a hybrid adjustment, where non-for-profit, for-profit, um, a lot of different volunteers from all walks of life, and everybody came together into one space to get a lot of things done across Evanston. Um, how do you how do you see maintaining that hybrid state? Because if we can address some of the major issues during a pandemic, and then let's say toward the end of the pandemic or when it dries up, then it goes away, and then the issues remain. What do you think can be done to kind of put some plans in place for long term sustainable programs that really meet the needs of the Evanston community?
Yeah, that's a great and very very deep question, right? There's a lot of things that need to be done, and I think that So first of all, I believe and know, even in the brief time I've gotten to know our staff, that for our part, we are going to be continuing that approach, right? We want to live in community in the same way that we did during the pandemic. And I know so many folks on this team have always done that, and the Community Foundation in many ways has always done that. And it's just we want to make that such a we want to make it a core part of our work and our approach. And I think if anything, I might have to pull a lot of our staff back and say, hey, you can't be on 25 commissions and community groups, and still sleep. So I think I'll have the opposite problem here. But I think, another piece that's really important is that I think we have to, we have such a great history here with Leadership Evanston. And I know so many people on the Zoom right now have probably gone through that program. And I think we need to continue to elevate leaders, because the thing that's going to perpetuate community collaboration is the community. We can be a gathering point. We can be someone who helps bring these disparate folks together, but the community has to be accountable to itself to do those things, right? And so we need to elevate as many leaders as possible through Leadership Evanston and through connecting with other ways to develop leaders and highlight leaders and find new sources for leaders. I've shared this with a few folks, but when you look back at like the history of the civil rights movement, and so many of the folks you see when you watch, documentaries about that are men. But when you really look at who was moving people in places like the town where my father's from Clarksdale, Mississippi, these little tiny towns, there were women going into congregations, helping people who were living under the thumb of Jim Crow to get connected to the movement, right? But we always we picture leadership in one very specific way, but leadership can look a lot of different ways. And so we want to highlight leaders who don't fit the traditional mode of leadership, but are moving their community, and give them a platform and a voice. And then we use, the tentacles that we have into so many different elements of the community to bring people together when they're hosting conversations. And we, and the community's got to listen. The community has to step up. We can provide the venue, we can provide, the opportunity to gather, but the community's got to hold itself accountable. And I believe that we will. I believe that we will, because as Larry said, we know that this wasn't, the pandemic brought a lot of things to the forefront, but this stuff was not new. People were going hungry before that. People were housing insecure before that. And some of the folks who, fell victim were falling victim to other illnesses, to, sort of from social determinants of health issues before that too. So it made these things, it maybe brought them to the forefront, but they're not new. And so we've got to continue to fight, and the community has to recognize that and hold itself accountable.
The next question is from Elizabeth Rockhair. She says, what size endowment could ECF aspire to in order to have the impact you dream of?
Woo. That's a great question. I know that so when you look at our endowment, and it's, probably public information, that all of our funds sort of total, a little over 30 million. I think I saw Ralph Siegel on the call earlier, and he could, give you the specific numbers. But I also think that, we have some ambitions to the part that ECF controls ourselves is not that whole endowment. They're donor advised funds and all these sort of things. So I think we would like to, double plus the amount that we sort of operate under. I think I don't want to give away too much because we haven't created concrete plans for this, but we do want to go on a campaign to build out our endowment pretty significantly. And really, I think kind of overall, kind of double the size of the endowment would be a great start to that over the next handful of years. But there's a lot of deep problems, and money isn't the only answer. And we saw that so much. So many of the folks talking on the calls talked about it wasn't just the dollars, it was the phone calls, it was the how are you doing check-ins, it was the let's come together and think this through. That was a big part of what we did. But money does help fix a lot of those things as well. Sorry, I'm trying to move here because I feel like I'm getting yellow faced by my lighting and my camera. I don't know if it's helping or hurting, but yeah, we want to build out our endowment significantly, and the number there is to be determined a bit, but we need to raise a significant amount to face the challenges that have exist in our community and have for a long time.
Do we have anyone else that would like to come to the stage? Brave souls. All right. Oh wait, we got someone. Here we go. Oh, I saw a hand up. No, I don't. Oh, sorry, Linnea. There you go, Linnea. You just have to
Okay,
unmute.
thank you.
Sorry about that.
Hi, my name's Linnea. It's nice to meet you. So
Nice to meet you as well.
back to Evanston.
Thank you so much.
I'm a recent Leadership Evanston alum. And during the program, we were challenged to reimagine leadership and reimagine Evanston, and tasked to choose an area to focus on. And so during our subgroups, we talked about the issues that we cared about the most. Like, for example, I was talking about single mothers and, how that has a special place in my heart. And I wanted to focus on programs that would help them. So, but my question for you is the same. Issue do you care about the most, and how do you choose to prioritize those issues within your initiatives?
Yeah.
Thank
Wow. Thank you so much for that question. I certainly have the issues that I care about. As I mentioned, my work sort of evolved from doing youth work. My first job was, working at a Boys and Girls Club in Lansing, Michigan. And I, moved on after grad school, and I worked for the city and moved into other places. And I understood, this sort of connection between early childhood development to young folks to the families, and sort of creating this cycle of support. So that's where I've always put a lot of my energy. Um, but there's so many things that pour into that. It's really tough to pick which one is the most important when people are suffering, and struggling in a lot of different ways. But I think the good thing about it for me is that it's not actually my choice. It's the community's choice, right? We have these grant making partners. We have, we're bringing community into our grant evaluation process, and the community chooses what needs are most important. And so I don't, the community prioritizes, and that's the way it should be, especially with a community foundation, because we're here to help sustain the community. And I can live in this community for the rest of my life, and my son can go on and live here, and then he can, maybe one day have children, and they can live here for the rest of their lives. We can be 5, 6, 7 generations deep. I know there's some folks on the call who are already there, and we still won't. And that still doesn't make anyone in that line qualified to speak for all of the challenges of Evanston. The community has to decide that together through some of these things. And so I want whatever the community wants to be pushed forward, right? And I think for our part, what we want to highlight and underline all that is how all of these things are going to push an equity lens throughout the community, right? But equity can mean a lot of different things in different contexts. So it'll be important to, there's different ways to accomplish those equity goals in different contexts, I think is a better way to say it. So I want the community to lead, and I'll follow and help to push our team's energy in that direction.
Great. Looks like we have another question from Karen Fleer. Bring her on stage.
Hi there, Saul. Thank you for taking our questions. I was wondering what gives you hope, what kind of who or what maybe, because there's a lot of obviously systemic issues, that the foundation's working on. What what makes you hopeful?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of the end of the story is my son makes me hopeful. The beginning of the story, and I shared a little bit. My dad was born in a town, Clarksdale, Mississippi, in the Delta, very near Memphis, Tennessee. And there is a plantation there, King and Anderson Plantation. Some of you historians may know there was a very famous sort of photo series done at that plantation many, many years ago. But if you look at my name, Saul Anderson, that is the origins of my name. And my dad is the 8th of 14 children, sharecropping family, and poor Black family in the Jim Crow South. And my grandparents pulled together everything they could. They brought the family north, and all 14 of their children went to college. And we aren't a wealthy family, we never were, but that opened doors for me that allowed me to be here in this moment. And and so I then carry this burden to create that opportunity for my son, but also for every other child. And just frankly, as a Black man, I think about that, through the lens of creating opportunities for children of color. I want every child to thrive, but I believe in that, that whole the rising tide lifts all boats things. If we can lift the children who are up against it most at birth, then we're creating opportunity for everyone. And so when I look at my son and I see how far his life is from what his grandfather's and his great-grandfather's life was, an opportunity and the doors that are open to them because of the sacrifice that they made, I have to believe that it's possible. And I have to believe that I have a duty. This is not just my job, this is my duty to create those opportunities for other folks. And just another quick aside, I grew up in the Church of God in Christ. Those of you who know Faith Temple Church here. That's my denomination. I actually grew up at Faith Temple Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That was the church I went to growing up. And there was a woman there. It was our head usher, Mother Montgomery. And my whole life, I thought this woman hated my guts because she, made me spit out every piece of candy. She wouldn't let me talk to my friends in church. She wouldn't let me sleep. She wouldn't let me do any of this stuff. And for those of you who are Kojic Pentecostal folks, we go to church for a long time. And so, I wanted to sleep a few of those times on Sunday afternoons. But when I graduated from college, this woman gave me the biggest hug. She told me that she loved me, and she told me, "So you got to go help us." And so my now obligation is not just to my family; it's to my people, and to people who had the things stacked against them that I had stacked against me at birth, and I owe it to her, who I realize now was trying to make me disciplined so I could handle the job and the responsibility that I had. But to the people who sacrificed for me as well. And so that's what gives me hope, is that I've seen the sacrifice work. And I am the living proof that it can work. And so, I can't give up. I can't give up until it's true for everybody. And I'm sorry. Some of my team knows I get a little emotional talking about this. I don't wipe my eyes here a little bit, but yeah, sorry.
We've got a lot of messages of gratitude in the chats for sharing. Would anyone else like to raise their hand for a question? Let's see. Betty Cones had a comment where she just says, "I hope ECF shows up in the community not only for financial support, but also by building relationship with individuals."
Yes, I agree. And if you for those of you who got a chance to see, the early portion of that, I really want to highlight the C in ECF. And I think our team is committed to that. As I said, when I look at the folks who I come, and work with in the office or via Zoom or whatever every day, are committed to that as well. And I think, as I said earlier, I think if anything, I'll have to hold folks back. Our team is ready for that work and wants that work. We want that. We want that to be a part of what ECF stands for. And I'm excited to unleash this team to do that work, because they're ready to go as soon as we can all, get together as safely as possible. We're ready to go.
See, we had one other question earlier that was sent in before the stream. What do you see as the strategic direction for ECF?
Yes, our whole strategic direction is going to be based on what creates a more equitable society here in Evanston. And again, I talked a little bit about this in the earlier portion, right? But it's really about making philanthropy accessible to all people. It's about investing in leadership from new lenses, and particularly in leaders of color. It's about doing more listening, being more deeply rooted in community. And it's about grant making that involves everyone, right? And then we need that strategy, and we'll continue to do work to understand what equity truly means to us and to the community as we build out our strategic plan. But then it's our responsibility from there to support the people who are going to be driving that important work in the community, support the organizations and entities that will be doing that. But we're going to be rooted in equity at our core, and be pushing that as the anchor for everything that we do.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. Were there any other questions or comments? Carol, are you raising your hand there? Great, one moment.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Okay. In some ways, apropos of nothing, I just wanted to insert a little bit of history. I'm a former board member, and I was around those 25 years ago when the Northwestern kids were talking about the dance marathon kids. And I just wanted to say that at that time, I guess it was 25 years ago, we wrote a strategic plan. No, back to dance marathon. It was Tom Yeager, who was our first paid staff, who shared his life with the United Way of Evanston. So he had He had one job. Half of it was ECF, which was sort of a very new organization. The other half was United Way. But so Tom was the one who had the idea of reaching out to the dance marathon kids as possible, donors. So I just wanted to mention that. And then the other thing, it was around that time that we wrote a strategic plan. And the strategic plan called for hiring a full-time executive director, which was a pretty big financial and reputational risk, I think. And so those conversations, there may be people here who are part of Judy Kemp. I don't remember if you were around then. I saw Mary Beth Schroeder earlier, but just to sort of take us back to the leaders at that time who kind of got this ball rolling, understanding that if we didn't have someone, a capable person, being in charge from a staff point of view, the organization really wasn't going anywhere. And that's when we hired Sarah Shostak at that time.
Yes.
So that's all, just showing my age.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm actually, when I was the youth coordinator, I spent time with Sarah. We're actually connecting actually tomorrow. We're getting some coffee together and talking. And, Monique as well is someone who I met just traveling in these leadership circles in Chicago, who I will be leaning on. Nobody does any of this by themselves, right? I realize that whatever success we're able to have during my tenure here, standing on the shoulders of people who invested their time, talent, and treasure in this work, right? And that includes the staff and the leaders and community members who made this come to pass. Even frankly, even the folks who, the folks who supported, even the folks who told us when we were doing something wrong. I don't want to leave those folks out as we're talking about what we stand on when we try to build something successful for the future. So I appreciate that history. I do not take it lightly. I don't take my responsibility to stand on their shoulders and build upon what they, what you and others started lightly at all. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I also want to say a special shout out to Mary Beth. I don't know if you remember this, Mary Beth, but one of my first meetings in Evanston, I've told a few other folks this story, but we went to Northwestern and we both got parking tickets. And for those of you who know Mary Beth Schroeder, you know that she immediately went and got that straightened out. And I was worried about getting this first parking ticket, at Northwestern and, my first community meeting, and Mary Beth fixed that right up for me. So thank you, my friend. I love you.
Okay, now you had to put it in the context. We were at invited,
yes, invited
to
and
talk
they
about community engagement. So I thought at least they should let us park.
Yes, and
but it's been a joy to know Saul. And the moment I heard that he was the new president, I thought, oh boy, we are going in the right direction. And so proud to know you and thrilled that you're the new president.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for our questions. So if you'd like to just say a couple parting words.
Sure. I've run out of words to express how excited I am. I got to go on, go on dictionary.com and pick out a few more synonyms. But I'm excited and I'm honored. I'm honored to be in this role, right? This community is very important to me. It has been my home personally, professionally for 15 years. And as I said, this is the place I wanted my son to grow up. And so to have this opportunity in this moment in time, right? There are a few windows in history, I think, that you get to create real change. And I believe this is one of them, right? If we can't seize the moment from the things that were laid bare to us from the pandemic and the movement for Black lives and all of these things that have been happening across our country, then we're accountable for that. And so this is a moment that we have to seize, to do something different. And it means a lot to me to be sitting in this seat, literally and metaphorically speaking, to do this work. So I'm ready. I'm grateful. And this isn't the last opportunity we have to talk. I'm here and I'm around. So come see me, come talk to me, come join us to make Evanston the best community it can possibly be. For everyone who lives here, and thank you all for joining tonight, and thank you in advance for the work we're going to do together moving forward.
All right, I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to unmute themselves for a round of applause for giving us your time today.
Woo! Woo! Well done.